You think you chose who you are. You didn't. And the part that feels like you is the most predictable part. Not your habits, not your preferences, not your beliefs, not even your reactions. You call it identity. But identity is not something you discovered. It is something that stabilized. Before you had awareness, you had patterns. Before you had choice, you had exposure. Before you had a personality, you had a repetition. And repetition does not ask for permission. It only requires consistency. Most people believe identity comes from within, from authenticity, from individuality, from something real. But what feels real is often just familiar. You didn't decide who to be. You became what worked. You learned what was accepted, what reduced friction, what produced results. And you repeated it, not consciously, efficiently, again and again and again, until repetition felt like truth, until truth felt like you. This is where identity actually forms, not through expression, through alignment. Start with your habits, the way you wake up, the way you think, the way you move through your day. It feels personal, but it isn't random. Your environment limits your options. Your options shape your behavior, and behavior does not innovate. It repeats. You follow what works, not because you chose it, because deviation is inefficient, and inefficiency is quietly punished. Now your preferences, what you like, what you avoid, what feels natural. It feels like taste. But taste is trained. You were exposed to certain things. You learned what is visible, what is rewarded, what is available. And slowly, you start preferring what was already there, not because it is better, because it is familiar. And familiarity removes doubt, not your beliefs. What you think is true, what you never question, what feels obvious. But belief is not built on truth. It is built on repetition. What you hear repeatedly stops sounding optional. What you see consistently stops feeling selective. Not because it is accurate, because it is present. Again and again and again, until questioning feels unnecessary. Now your reactions, how you respond, how you interpret, how you act under pressure, you call it instinct. But instinct is optimized memory. It is the fastest version. of what has been repeated the most. Your reactions are not spontaneous. They are trained shortcuts, refined over time, aligned with structure. At this point, identity is no longer a mystery. It is a system. Habits, preferences, beliefs, reactions, all connected, all reinforced, all stabilized, not controlled, stabilized. And this is where people misunderstand. They assume this means manipulation, that something is controlling them. But control is inefficient. It requires force. It creates resistance. Systems don't need that. They only need consistency. Because shaping is enough. If the environment is stable, behavior aligns. If behavior aligns, identity stabilizes. And once identity stabilizes, control becomes unnecessary. This is not manipulation. It is optimization. The system does not need to decide who you are. It only needs to make certain versions of you easier to become, more visible, more rewarded, more sustainable. And over time, you become that version, not because you chose it, because it worked. This is the quiet mechanism. You move toward what reduces friction, what produces results, what feels stable. And stability is rarely questioned. This is the irony. You believe you are expressing yourself, but most of the time, you are maintaining a pattern. You call it personality. The system calls it consistency. You call it preference. The system calls it reinforcement. You call it belief. The system calls it repetition. You call it instinct. The system calls it conditioning. And none of this requires control, because the structure is already enough. At some point, you stop asking where identity comes from, and you start asking what keeps it stable, because identity resists change. Not because you are strong, because change creates friction, and friction is avoided. So you remain consistent, predictable, reliable, stable, and stability feels like you. But identity is not fixed. It is maintained every day through repetition, through environment, through structure, which leads to something more precise. If your habits were shaped, if your preferences were trained, if your beliefs were repeated, if your reactions were conditioned, then what exactly is choosing? You feel like you decide, but your decisions follow patterns. Patterns you did not design. Patterns you continue because they worked. You are not forced to be who you are. You are optimized to remain that way. And once that optimization is stable, you stop questioning it because it feels like you. But if you didn't choose who you are, then what exactly is making your decisions?